Alright, so we're just getting into the second half of the year, which means it's time to start planning for what furry conventions I want to go to for next year. I swear I have to start planning these things earlier and earlier. Thankfully, some of the cons I do know I want to go to have already opened up for pre-registration, so let's see if we can get things taken care of so I don't have to worry about it later in the year. Let's start with one of my new favorites, Further Confusion. Let's go here, register now, and oh, what? $100 for standard reg? Really? Okay, maybe that's just FC. We know how expensive California is. Let's check out FWA. Let's go to register now and have that load. And wait, what? They're $100 too, and that's early bird. It's $120 if you're late. Okay, maybe this is like a 2026 thing. Let's see what MFF is doing this year. Here we go. Love all the purple. Go to registration, pre-register, Tuesday, Thursday, and hey, yo, they're $100 too. Geez, is triple digits going to be the new standard for going to cons these days? Well, it might not be triple digits, but there's no mistaking that going to conventions is getting more and more expensive. And that includes everything from the travel, to the food, to the stuff that you buy at the dealer's den. But in this video, I just want to focus on the cost of registering for a con in the first place. And it's easy to complain about it, but do we actually know why this is the case? Is there something that happened over the past few years that caused this rapid increase in prices? Or is it just a bunch of little things that were all adding up at the same time? Well, I took a deep dive into the cost of running conventions and found that the reasons why furry conventions are getting more and more expensive to attend are actually a lot more complicated than you might think, and in a few ways, a requirement if cons want to continue happening in the first place. Let me explain. So that skit that we did at the beginning of the video was meant to be a joke, but it wasn't too far off from my actual reactions for looking at cons to register for in 2026. Though it really shouldn't have surprised me so much. Everyone knows that furry conventions, especially here in the United States, aren't cheap and are becoming more and more expensive over time. And everyone knew and pretty much accepted this until recently, where there's been quite the outcry regarding just how much furry convention registration has gone up. Personally, I think it was seeing triple digits passing that $100 mark for the base registration is what triggered a lot of that, because even if it's just $1 off, you read numbers with double digits differently than triple digits, and that extra digit just hurts that much more. But that's only a very small part of it. I think what's also making registration price jumps feel that much more painful is that they're exactly that, jumps. I think we're all used to prices creeping up over time just in general, but when we see big hikes like this, it makes us extra aware that this thing that I want to attend is a lot more than it was in years prior, which is more or less a symptom of something that you pay for once a year as opposed to once a week or even once a month. And I think we're extra sensitive to this when it's something that you pay for once a year, as opposed to once a week or even just once a month. That just adds to the overall sticker shock of these new registration prices. So that's why these new registration prices feel so bad. But what I want to know is why? Why is this happening? Because I'll be honest with you, as expensive as they are, I don't think there's any malicious intent here at all. I really don't buy into the conspiracies that this is a way to weed out a certain population of the fandom, or this is the easiest way for cons to put an artificial limit on attendance. Those may be secondary effects, but I don't think that conventions are going into the decision of raising prices with things like that being the primary reason. And also, before we get too far down the complaining route, if we put things into perspective, furry conventions are still a whole lot cheaper than other themed conventions for other interests, especially here in the US. For example, tickets for things like Comic-Con are around $300 if you go for all 4 days. PAX West, which happens here in Seattle, is $260 for the entire weekend. DragonCon over in Atlanta starts at $100 only if you know that you're coming a little less than a year in advance, but jumps up to $175 just a few weeks out. And those are all still entertainment or leisure conventions. Once you start talking about professional conferences, you're looking at multiple thousands of dollars just to attend at the lower end. So yes, furry conventions are getting expensive, but they still pale in comparison to just how high things can get. But that might not be the case for very long if the trends that we're seeing continue to hold true. So that begs the question, are we paying more for the same things? Or is the money actually going somewhere that helps both the con and us as con-goers have a better experience? Well, as you might imagine, it's a little bit of both. But before we get into that, let's talk about something that hopefully isn't too expensive. I want to take this time to thank the sponsor for today's video, you. Yes, all of you who support this channel through Patreon. If you enjoy the videos I make here and on other social media platforms, Patreon is the best way to support me directly to help make those videos even better. This way, I can continue to build this channel without having to take on random corporate sponsors that, let's be honest, none of you would end up using anyway. And this isn't one of those general support Patreons either. No, you actually get stuff for signing up. First of all, you'll get all of my videos, both short and long form, a week in advance. So if you sign up, you'll get to see the videos that everyone can only see next week, right now. You also get voting power to choose what topics I cover in my videos every month, as well as a special role in my Discord where you get to hang out with me and other patron members. And finally, you get exclusive long-form videos from me every Monday that are a lot more open, honest, and unscripted, allowing me to talk about things that might not fit the general channel audience, if you know what I mean. You can check all of that out and join at patreon.com/FinnThePanther and be a part of the membership that helps make these the best furry edutainment videos that we can make. Thank you so much for joining. Now, let's get back to talking about why cons cost so much these days. All right, let's dive deep into why furry conventions are becoming more and more expensive. And the first one is very closely related to something that you learn if you take any economics 101 class. There's just more demand. We've talked a bunch on this channel about how the furry fandom has grown by a lot, especially in the last half decade, which means the demand for all things furry has gone up just as quickly. More people want more art of their personas, more people want fursuits, and you guessed it, more and more people want to go to furry conventions. And while the number of furries wanting to attend cons has jumped, the number of available cons to go to hasn't gone up in proportion, and that's ignoring the fact of how top-heavy furry conventions are, where the top 3 to 5 cons are basically going to have inelastic demand. So as the attendance numbers of conventions continue to grow, so does the cost of just managing all of these people. And yeah, a lot of it is straight up economics. These cons just need more capital. Things like moving to larger venues costs money, and when more resources are needed from the same venues, they're going to be asking for a higher price when those contract negotiations come up. And even though cons are still volunteer run, those volunteers need more resources to work with. That's more laptops to register people, more radios to communicate, more Wi-Fi access points for those selling in the dealer's den. All of that is part of the growth of furry conventions, and since registrations are the main funding source for these events, it makes sense that we're going to be on the hook for supporting that growth. The thing is that these types of cost increases would happen no matter what the rest of the general economy was doing. But all of those price increases are on top of the general rise of costs of everything else. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of why things are more expensive, but the fact of the matter is that the rising cost of everything combined with the stagnant growth of people's income has made everything just a lot more expensive. And of course, furry conventions are not immune to that. In fact, they're straight up saying the quiet part out loud now. FWA, for example, specifically called out that the rising cost of existing was part of their decision to raise registration prices. And honestly, that outward transparency is a bit refreshing. And again, there's not much that we or the cons or anyone else can do to rectify that. That's just part of the reality of the world that we live in today. But even with that being said, I don't want to make it seem like cons aren't doing anything with the increased revenue that they're getting from registration either, because cons have actually done a lot to make the convention experience more enjoyable. We would be having a completely different conversation if cons were just sitting on their laurels and just taking more and more of our money for the heck of it. But there's actually been a lot of innovation and honestly risks that cons have tried to help make them more fun. Some of them include making cons more accessible, like the more robust shuttle system at Anthrocon this year. Some include adding more unique experiences to the con itself, like FWA's partnership with the Georgia Aquarium. And some of them don't always work as well as they were intended to, like FWA Again's virtual queue system. But no matter how effective they are, all of these ventures to help make cons more fun cost money. And some of them are actually quite necessary to manage a con of the sizes that they are now. And when all of those costs get calculated, it's up to us as attendees to foot the bill. So yes, why cons are getting more expensive has both a complicated and a rather simple answer. There are just more of us going, and things are getting more and more expensive at the same time. Heck, if I were running a con and were presented with these two problems, raising prices for my attendees would be one of the first things I'd do as well. And while it is unfortunate that cons are becoming more and more of a luxury experience when you factor everything in, there are still a lot of really effective ways to save a little bit of money when looking to attend one. Staying with roommates at con hotels is a great way to really slash your overall costs. And even if you are a fursuiter, don't be afraid to look at rooms that aren't in the main hotel. Seriously, cons have gotten a lot better at moving people from those outside hotel locations to the main event center. The same can be said with meals. Instead of eating out 2 to 3 times a day, which in most cities where cons are, you're looking at anywhere from $50 to $150 a day if you're not careful. If you could buy some essential food items that last throughout the week, you could turn that $50 to $150 and make it last the entire weekend instead. And of course, you can always volunteer some of your time to help out at these conventions as well, which could potentially waive your entire registration costs, depending on the con. The bottom line is, furry conventions are being squeezed, both by us attending and by the rest of the world just costing more to live, and they have to make it up somewhere. And while the rate at which they change may fluctuate over time, one thing that we should all be prepared for is that the cost of registering for furry conventions isn't going down anytime soon. Alright, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check out my Discord and join the Patreon to help things out over here. Both are in the description below. I'll catch you all in the next one, but until then, stay wild out there. Peace.